So now with so-called elections approaching, we could see that in Russia we have only one vote which matters. It's Putin's vote. There is still a chance. I mean, I would say it's a remote chance, but there's a chance, and only Medvedev's hope that this vote Putin will cast this vote in favor of Medvedev to keep for another 6 years. Personally, I doubt. But it's very clear that there's no political fight in Russia. Everything Medvedev does, you know, just all he does is trying to convince Putin that he's not a threat, that Putin could keep him for another 6 years, and there will be no change in the status quo. Ironically, there are few members of Medvedev's team that are far more aggressive, and they're trying to push Medvedev to act. But it was a most spectacular failure, because all the cries just were left unanswered.
Well, my question is related to Niels. So our generation will see that when Putin is no longer able to choose the next leader of Russia simply because he'll be dead. So who and what do you see on Russia's political horizon?
Look, if Putin stays in power, you know, and turns into another Mubarak or Gaddafi, I think it's highly unpredictable. Because it's what we know from the history of the 21st century and the collapse of the authoritarian regimes, that there were two scenarios. One well-known scenario called Orange Revolution. And we could see it in Serbia, in Georgia, Republic of Georgia, and in Ukraine. But Orange Revolution required certain components that were not, and are not in place in Russia. It's the legitimate opposition, having some, 20 to 25% of seats in the parliament, probably even more in Ukraine. Some of the free media, and most important, unwillingness of the regime. And when I say regime, it's not necessarily only Milosevic, but people under him, to use force and to spill blood. So the regimes are looking tough and cruel, but everybody feels that there are certain limitations. And if you have enough people on the street and protesting against fake elections, it could lead to a change. And it happened. Now, all these years, Putin and his cronies, they built Russian police state to prevent any scenario of Orange Revolution. But we know from recent events in the Arab world that it could be a very different kind of revolution. So I think that Russia, the collapse of Putin's regime, will be more likely, Tahrir Square, Cairo, or even worse, because I think that Putin will not act as Mubarak, more likely Gaddafi. So, and this is a great concern, because Russia has exhausted all limits of violence, and more violence in Russia will not bring democracy. So the only thing we can do is just to do our utmost to create a situation where this transition could be peaceful, or if it's not peaceful, with least violence.
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up question? To what extent do you think Putin's acting as a sort of Saddam Hussein figure who's reigning in sectarian violence? What kind of chaos would be unleashed if democracy were allowed to reign in Russia? Do you think that group would just completely splinter?
Well, I don't think that Putin should be. When I say Putin should be like a Gaddafi, it's more like an algorithm rather than the personality. It's not Saddam Hussein, not Gaddafi, because I believe for all these people, despite all the luxury they had, it was still the zeal for power was crucial. So staying in power, being in charge, that was absolutely crucial. So Putin, when I also said Stalin and Abramovich, I would put emphasis on Abramovich, on oligarch. Putin is more of an oligarch, and power for him is needed to protect the wealth, because he believes in money and the power given by money more than anything else. Now, the problem that he discovered, and I think that was his greatest failure of his presidency, he couldn't work out an exit strategy. So he entered in the year 2000, and I don't think for a moment he could imagine the vast power and opportunities given to him by presidency, and also by the political and economic development in the world. There's this spike in oil prices and war in Iraq and the war on terror. And he thought it could be almost automatic for him to just to move on and to decide later who could be sitting in his chair. And when he spoke about himself as being a slave in the gallery, I think it was a typical, you know, it's the Sigmund Freud was talking. Because he recognized that even with this, even if it's a gold chain, he's stuck. Leaving power means, most likely, maybe 100% certainty, losing the money. Not only, you know, his fortune, but the fortune of the whole group behind him. Because in Russia today, all its fortunes, they are closely tied to the grip of power. So that's why I think he's stuck and he will not go anywhere because he doesn't see any option of keeping these wealth. And I believe today probably he's the richest man on earth if he's no longer in power. So that's why he could do whatever. So I would be surprised of any crazy acts committed by this regime. But when it happens, I always tell people to look at the economic reasons behind it. For instance, the war against Georgia and annexation of Georgian territory, for me, it was a logical continuation of Putin's bid for Olympic Games, Winter Olympic Games in Sochi. Because Russian geography, Sochi is very close to the official Georgian border, and the Olympic Village is about 5 miles away from Abkhazian border. So having, you know, his dream event, and actually it's like a new real estate in Russia. It's like St. Petersburg for Peter the Great, and Putin wanted, of course, not to go to the Baltic Sea, but to a nice warm place, a subtropical resort. And he needed, you know, to sort of consolidate this piece of real estate. And that was a geopolitical reason, but also it was an economical reason. They couldn't organize a transportation of almost 100 millions of tons of construction materials from the north because of the roads. So Abkhazia was the only material supply for this mega construction project. So the whole war was, in my view, not about. It's nice to take on Salzasika. He hates Saakashvili. You know, that's important. But Abkhazia was #1 priority. Now he controls what he believes is the most lucrative piece of real estate in the ex-Soviet Union.
I was wondering if there was a specific issue or event that prompted your involvement with another Russia, or was it just the collective dissatisfaction with the Putin regime?
You mean the creation of this coalition, or just my personal?
For your personal, I was wondering.
No, but I grew up in the Soviet Union. You know, I played under the Soviet flag and then the Russian flag, and I felt responsibility for the country. So at one point, I got convinced that, you know, there were only two choices. So either I fight or I have to leave the country. Because as Putin staying in power means, at the end of the day, the collapse of Russia. And I saw the collapse of the Soviet Union, and I don't want to see the collapse of Russia, which I think, you know, I wouldn't say imminent yet, but the chances are no longer, you know, slim. And fighting Putin's regime was sort of the very natural way of expressing my concern for the country and my distaste for any form of dictatorship. Okay.
You mentioned that you believe that it's become structurally hard to, say, have this sort of revolution, but to what extent do you feel that there's even any political will in the people for any form of change, or the extent to which even creating a more transparent democracy is a priority?
I don't think that all these revolutions and the big changes, they're influenced by the majority of the nation. You always need, you know, a minority, very often in the capital or in the big cities. And the Putin's regime built up quite an effective structure in attracting these groups and giving them something to enjoy. So the dynamic minority, active minority in Russia today, especially if we look at Moscow, St. Petersburg, is getting annoyed, but it's not yet, you know, at the level where they're ready to revolt. So if you if you ask people, and that's even the official polls, they show the decline of popularity of Putin and United Russia. But we know that there's a gap between passive disapproval and active protest. So one of the things that Putin recognized from the very beginning, he needed to create this image in the minds of Russians, what I call few and many. So we are few, they are many. So when I say we, it's the opposition. That's why they had such a brutal attacks on peaceful demonstrations. And many Western journalists, they kept asking us, oh, you had 1, 2, 3, 5,000 people maximum. So Putin is making a big mistake by bringing 10,000 riot police from all over the country to beat you up, to arrest you, and to destroy the demonstration. He could ignore you. I think Putin knows better. So he knows that if he allows these demonstrations to run peacefully and without any interruption, he may see more people, because fear is a very important component. So for many Russians, especially in Moscow, we know that and they are sharing it on the internet. Yeah, I would like to join the demonstration, but I could be beaten, I could be arrested, I could lose my job. So I mean, they don't feel that the situation is so bad for them to actually take on the street. But in the last few months, I mean, we could see a gradual change in the mood of Russians, because you could analyzing the economic data, you could see that export and import, they're going up, where the capital is fleeing. So, and it's not only oligarchs, it's not the richest of Russian businesses. Average Russians with some money, with some opportunities, most of them young, they are looking for a new life outside of Russia. They don't want to take the risk of fighting Putin, but they are walking away. So sort of this social, demographic, and economic situation in Russia has been deteriorating despite its very, very high oil prices, and that eventually might create some kind of explosive combination for the revolt. But I don't know when and how it happens. I don't know. So I think that is the status quo as we used to observe in the last few years is doomed. But the outcome of this breakup, it's beyond my ability to predict.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the Other Russia and sort of as an opposition movement, what you guys are doing, or if you have a specific strategy for how to combat this, not just Putin, but sort of Russia in general.
The problem that is of being in the opposition to Putin's regime is that, I mean, you don't have the luxury of the long-term strategy, because you have to react. So it's your best strategy is a tactics of survival. So it's very important you stay around, you can bring more people into your ranks and files, you can reach out some new segments of the population, but you cannot, present a strategy, because strategy means, you have a calendar of the events. And technically, as I mentioned, for Orange Revolution, calendar of the events is always related to the elections. But elections in Russia today, if we can use this word, they are not real. It's a fake, because all meaningful opposition groups simply banned from participating. So unfortunately, we are restricted to the same strategy of organizing this protest and using this new means of communication, the internet, namely, to spread out our ideas. And we have some of the new concepts that we have been playing with recently is to create some kind of virtual e-Russia, so there's a virtual parliament and bringing people in and giving them an opportunity to actually speak out. We had a project called Putin Must Go, and there are more than 90,000 names, real names of people submitting their names, and many of them, several thousand, submitting even their comments. So which shows that there is still already some appetite to protest and to demonstrate the frustration with Putin's regime, even writing very nasty comments about Putin, signed by name, and many of them will be given the telephone numbers. But it's still a trick to perform, how to actually utilize this activity on the internet into the massive protests on the streets.